Hi, I'm Ellie Shore. Art salons have been a labor of love for me for almost 9 years, most of that time in person at the Armory Arts Center in West Palm Beach, and now virtually on Zoom. Art salons bring together artists, curators, and many others who want to meet some of the leading contemporary artists in South Florida and to know more about them and their work. It's also a chance to meet each other and share our own thoughts, questions, and experiences. Tonight's artist, Karen Rifas, is known for large-scale architectural installations in three media: leaf and cord installations, cord and mural installations, and colorful, solid geometric shapes in 2 and 3 dimensions. Her 20-year collaboration with choreographer and dancer Dale Andre animates her installations in a way that expresses how Rifas, once a dancer herself, thinks about space. Sandra Schulman wrote about her in 2018 when her solo exhibition opened at the Bass Museum, saying, "You can tell she had fun, playing with the malleability of perception. She's been working this territory for a long time, playing with lines in space by threading leaves or strings across rooms and space. This creates shapes, both inner and outer, art that is pop and up. It's particularly suited to Miami, where the light, flora, and architecture sings in these rich tropic colors year-round." The following year, Karen was awarded the Michael Richards Award by Oolite Arts. The award comes with a commitment by the Bass Museum to give the recipient an exhibition within the next year. Because the museum was closed by the pandemic, they instead commissioned a series of banners,
It's all dark.
brightly colored banners
We
that
use them
are
there,
in
so they
their
just
Art Outside initiative. Karen lives and works in Miami. She received a BFA in 1985 and an MFA in 1987 from the University of Miami. She taught at New World School of the Arts for many years, as well as at Kendall campus of Miami-Dade College and the University of Miami. Her work is represented by Emerson Dortch Gallery in Miami. Her presentation tonight is titled Space, Place, Interaction. When she begins, I ask that you use your imagination and picture us all in the same room together. Sense the energy that would fill the room with laughter, whispering, and applause. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce Karen Rifas.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here tonight. Ellie, what a nice introduction. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining me this evening. My talk tonight is Space, Place, and Interaction. Why this title? Well, I'm not sure, but let's see if we can go through it. Space. My work has always been about physically using space and making the viewer tangibly aware of it in actual 3D space and even on a 2D surface such as the pictures plane. For example, a lone object in a room or painted on a piece of paper makes me keenly aware of the space around it. It follows that the actual placement of that object in that space is also crucial. Place. This, of course, is connected to space. My work is always responding to a particular place and looking for what is unique to it alone, site-specific. I could respond to its physicality, architecture, or even to its unique history. In 2D, the grid acts as my structure and architecture. It is a place within which to compose and where one mark dictates the next. Interaction. Being tuned into a particular space also involves the participation of the viewers and their placement in or in front of the work. Hopefully, one will read the work differently from multiple vantage points. So this is kind of the Duchamp idea that the person that views it interprets it, understands it, and when whatever century they're in, understands it according to how they believe it's going to be. I'm going to start with an installation at the Bass Museum in 2018 called Deceptive Constructions. And if we think about it, all art is deceptive. It's not living, breathing, but it is to us, but it's not real. So it is a deception. So I'm looking, or we think we're standing where the photographer photographed this and looking into the gallery space. And if you look closely, it almost looks like this bench in the front is connected to the L in the back. Well, we know that's not quite true. It's a deception. So let's go into the room and take a look. Okay, now we're in the room and we can see that the bench is quite a distance from the L shape in the back. And we can start looking at this room and noticing that it's very long. It's 55 feet long and it's 27 feet wide and it's 14 feet high. And I looked at this room quite a bit before I made a maquette and decided what kinds of things I would put in this room. And some of the features that I wanted to exaggerate and emphasize were this at the top. If you see the panels on the right-hand side of the screen, they're up at this 14-foot level, but the ceiling is higher. They wanted to retain this beautiful wooden ceiling. And so I too wanted to emphasize that. And then your eye probably bounces down to the little panel paintings at the bottom, almost near the floor, or perhaps looks at the benches, and you might decide to sit down on those benches and take a selfie, as many people did, or just wander around and look through the space. If you look back towards the space, you notice a broken column, you notice the L, you notice a picture in the back. Now we're in the room and you can see how color is also deceptive. If you look at the benches here, we know that the vinyl floor is all the same color, turquoise, and the orange is the same color. But if you look at the shadows that are happening, you know that there's been another deception. The pink looks orange, the orange looks darker, so does the turquoise. So these are kind of the fun things that I like to play with. I wanted to point out the little 4-panel piece at the bottom of the screen to the right. And I want to talk about accidents. We just had one. Here's another one. Behind these 4 panels was a metal plate that I wanted to hide. And so I dropped this picture down to this level. But it made it more interesting. It made your eye flow through that space. The other accident that happened was that when I ordered the panels, instead of 4 panels being the same height, 2 came in at a deeper depth. And so it actually added to the piece. So accidents are a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Now, while we're up close here, if you look at the broken column in the back, you can notice that there's a bench underneath and people sat in that bench, but they felt uncomfortable because it was almost like that top column was going to fall on their head. I heard many comments like that. And you look and you see the L shape is framing that painting. And I want to talk about the painting in the back. Originally in my plans, I wasn't planning on having that painting, but in putting together a maquette and putting all the different things that I was thinking about doing for this space, I knew that I needed a focal point. And so I decided to make this painting, which was really the largest work that I had done up until that time. 45 by 45 inches was what I had been doing. And then this one became 90 by 90, 2 sheets of Arches watercolor paper put together. All right, now here, another site-specific thing is this L shape. It is actually the same height as the door behind it. And the other thing about this piece is if you stand facing the pink towards the wall, I planned for that piece to have that big white wall as a background. Now here is the painting. One of the things that I figured out in the 45 by 45 paintings was that where you stood is what you saw. So if you stood on the left-hand side of the painting, you could almost peer into that orange and turquoise triangle. And if you stood on the right, you would see the orange box form kind of falling towards you. And the larger the piece, the more that was in view. So I was thinking big. Now, as you turned around and looked the other direction, you saw another painting that I made just for this piece, that big painting on the opposite wall near the door. Also, other, well, deceptions is that orange T shape. Part of it is on the floor. It's the floor vinyl, and part of it is the benches. So you have these different points of view. Also, if you look at that 4-panel piece on the far right side of the screen, your eye wants to put that together. So I'm really interested in how all these deceptions work. Now here, if you look towards the left in the corner is a bench that looks transparent. It's not, it's the vinyl covered wood, but because the baseboards are there, it looks, it reflects and looks transparent. And here you can see the paintings up close that were in this exhibition. Now I'm going to go to back to Emerson Dorsch Gallery. This is the year before, in 2017. Again, you see the benches, but with different vinyl. And I'm interested in two different things. One is kind of making this like a theater in the round so that you can see what's going on. If you were sitting on the right-hand bench, you might see one view. If you were sitting on the bench, on the narrow side of the bench on the left, the floor vinyl would look like a different painting. So that's one of the things that I'm interested in working with. And the other thing that I'm interested in working with is color, and how color like the orange and turquoise can make this wonderful bing as they bounce off each other, or Alber's theory, how one color can change the color next to it. Also in this installation, this show called Performs, I had dancers like, I see Ellie in the back and leaning on a desk back there in the picture, but also you see Dale Andre and the blue, and I've worked with Dale for many, many years. I create a space, we talk about it. She and her dancers interpret the space and interpret what I'm trying to get across. So here they are, dancers and musician, moving the benches around and interacting with the space. And I found that when I do that, and I have dancers in the space, that the audience follows suit and feels comfortable moving the installation around themselves, and also to really investigate it. And that's, I guess, as artists, what we want people to do, is to spend a lot of time looking at and thinking about the work we're doing. This is at a Revelo gallery in 2014, and I've begun to paint walls. So behind the, you see the yellow either on the wall and on the floor. If you look closely, you can see that the cords, and this is a cord piece, travel around at the top along the edge of the corners, around the corner, but on the floor they make a straight line. And in doing so, they make this gentle curve, which is something that I enjoy thinking about. Again, here are dancers and a musician, and the dancers are interacting with the piece and pulling the audience through to the other installations in the work. The two dancers are, their arms stretched and pulling out, expressing the tautness of the strings. Now this is 2008, it's called Cornered, and it's every installation in this whole show called Cornered either was tucked into a corner or made its way into a corner. Now, the same piece was shown at MoCA in Pivot Points Part 3, and here you see the dancers expressing the height of the gallery and the verticality of the piece. And here we are back at Steinbaum Gallery, and the dancers actually had 3 little sections of this cornered piece that they moved through by pulling up cords that were attached by magnets so that they could move through. Now, here is another, the dancers move from that installation into this center gallery, another cornered piece. The columns, black and white, wended their way into the back corner. And I want to point out some kind of deceptions in this too. If you look at the red panel on the right, all of that solid red mass is really cords that are 6 inches apart. So our eye plays these tricks, which is my fun. And also site specific to the piece, you see the red cords following around the corners. Now, if you look closer into as the dancers move closer to the back wall, you can see the red cords again. And you can also see what happens when cords bunch up, and you see different arrangements of cords, whereas we know they're all equally distant apart. The other thing is you cannot tell, even if you're standing there, whether the white cords and yellow cords are interwoven or they're one in front of another. Now here's another cord piece. This one is straight lines that form a curve. This one is from another show called Strung Out. If you look closely, you see that straight lines form this a curve again, and then I'm playing with the shadows to complete the piece. Now, this particular piece was shown again during Art Basel at Acqua gave me a space. I don't know if you know Harry's Pizzeria, but there's this wonderful loft, New York loft-like space above it, and I had a really good time playing with that space. Here's one piece from that space, and here is another piece. Again, where you stand is what you see. So this zigzag pattern is also the straight line on the right-hand side of the page. And then I had fun playing with this funny little air conditioning duct that was in the space. Now this is aboard the Oasis of the Seas. This is not cord and not nylon cord. This is stainless steel cable and aluminum balls. It's 90 feet by 50 feet by 20 feet. And it traverses 6 elevator shafts in the atrium of the Oasis. I had the help of maritime engineers and fabricators, and there's also balls that are placed along the cable. And I didn't want them to be just placed one here, one here, one here, so I used a bingo tumbler to decide where those balls would end up. Now I'm going back in time to 1989, and I was working at, well, I got my master's at the University of Miami and did a lot of bronze casting, and then I taught there, so I had access to the foundry and poured many crucibles of 350 pounds of bronze. I want to talk about this piece a little bit because it has to do with another kind of theory that runs through my art, and that is there's a very delicate balance between nature and between structure and freedom. And at that particular time in my life, I was expressing a little anxiety. I had 2 teenagers, and I wanted to give them structure, but I wanted them to give them some independence so that they would become independent adults. So there was always this struggle. So there's mom on one side of this pile of leaves and the kids on the other side, I guess. Also, you see leaves at the bottom, and the leaves, I moved into a home with a wonderful oak hammock and had plenty of leaves to sweep up. So I use them in many different ways. And this is this divide between kids and mom. The other thing, just to talk about the bronze casting process, I would take wax when it was just warm, not too hot to touch, and I would manipulate that around wooden dowels. And then, of course, by the lost wax process, I would melt out the wax in plaster molds and then pour bronze in and then weld these little sections together. Another thing I did quite a bit of was paper making, and I started out like we all start out with the kitchen blender, and then from there graduated to a trash can with an outboard motor hooked to my car battery to mulch up the handmade paper, and then finally got myself a 5-gallon daiquiri blender to make the paper. And I made buckets full, and these balls are made with a chicken wire armature, and then around that I packed the handmade paper. Just a note, were affected by gravity, so you had to let half dry, flip it over, and then do the other half, otherwise the paper would just fall away. Now, this particular installation was done in Rio, Brazil, and it references the rainforest. That was my intent when I went down there, to do a piece about the rainforest. It was a beautiful structure. It was the imperial palace for the king and queen of Portugal, who had fled to Brazil a couple centuries before. So I took these spools of thread or whatever, yarn, and slanted them up to this beautiful wood beam ceiling, and then dropped the cord by gravity straight down. The cord at the end of it had a big long darning needle, and that pierced a leaf, and they fell to present or absent piles of leaves. That therefore it was called Present Absent, and about the rainforest. Now, I also stitched a lot of leaves. I had 3 Singer sewing machines at one time. Always one would be in the shop, but I had a real Zen experience running these leaves through the sewing machine, 2 this way, 3 this way, spaces between them, just having a good time. And then I would form them into these cones and place them about as installations. Also dealing with the shadows, the very soft shadows and acute shadows that can happen. Another in 2009, nature structure, and this was a narrow room, and I threaded leaves above one's head and then on the side walls, many layers. This is Reflections. Actually, it's 2 pieces that are both the same. They one's in front of the other, and one could also walk right through that space. And the leaves, they're oak leaves. I use them dry, stitch them dry, and then they have this beautiful golden color that kind of shimmers in the light. Oh, I wanted to just say also that I showed this at PAM in a show called Disappearances, Shadows, and Illusions, and they own this piece. Now, the last leaf piece that I'm going to show you is this from Miami International Airport. It's on 3 levels. So again, this idea of site-specific. And to plan this piece, I had to think about what was up there on the ceiling and also what you would see from the ground floor and straight ahead. And I used a maquette to figure out what I was going to do. So let me show you the maquette. Okay, if you look, you can see how I plan my work. Most of the time I do make a maquette. If you look at the ceiling, you can see the water sprinklers and light bulbs and air conditioning, so that I know when I go into a space what I'm going to do after much planning and measuring of the actual space and then making a maquette. And also it allows me a chance to figure out how much material I need to stitch for something like this. This is a maquette for Dancing as Fast as I Can that was shown at NSU Museum in a consortium show in 2005. And you can see that the little circles there, one says 36 inches across, and it wouldn't be just 3 strings or 4 strings, it would be 16, but just enough for me to know what I needed to do. And you might remember this piece. I showed it to you. It was one of the pieces above Harry's Pizzeria. Then I was fortunate enough in 2015 to have a show at the Freedom Tower with my maquettes, and so happy because Bob Huff, a dear friend of mine, and Robert Teely were also having shows at the same time. And they have been employers, teachers, mentors, and helped me out a great deal. Now, I sometimes do political work. I haven't for a while. I think our TV screens have been full of it and done a pretty good job. But until recently, and that was when I decided to do a book called 26 Funeral Homes, Miami, Florida. So let's go back and look at some of the political work that I did. And this is one called Morning Coffee. What you see is little vignettes on these stools and other little tables that talk about all the happenings. This happened during Obama's first presidency, and I had a voting registration drive going on, and all the newspaper clippings that I read every morning ended up hanging above near the ceiling. And then the vignettes were about all the issues that were happening in that election, such as the Iraq War and Lilly Ledbetter and Roe versus Wade and the environment and Enron, WorldCom and Tyco and all kinds of, you name it, it was in there, even the mortgage crisis. So this is a piece that was in the show, but it's from a much earlier date. It's from 1997. And this piece happened because my husband was working on a case for a woman who had been in her job many, many years, but then was fired and replaced by a younger worker. And so it deals with I'm expendable, you are expendable, which still resonates, I think, today. I just want to talk a little bit about the how I get all these pieces of junk that I put together. Sometimes I go to a thrift store and have something that I'm looking for specifically, and other times it's like an archaeological dig. You kind of get into what's the world talking about, and I end up finding material that goes that direction. I have to tell you that one year my husband knew what to give me for Christmas, and he gave me $100 gift certificate to a thrift store, which I used. Okay, this piece here is birds that live in seed houses should not be gluttons. It's made of bird seed and glue, and I actually made molds just like you do for the lost wax process, only I mushed in the glue and bird seed, and then when it was dry, screwed it together like you would a wooden birdhouse. The last of the found objects I'm going to show you is this. When the scissors closes, it forever alters what is between the blades. A simple action can have large and lasting consequences, which kind of relates to the next image I'm going to show you, which is 26 Funeral Homes, Miami, Florida. It was published in conjunction with the AIM Biennial 2020, organized by William Cordova, Marie Vickles, Jean Moreno, and Michael Solomon. William came up to me and some other artists, and some artists came to him, and he said, yes, I want you to make something. It's going to be an online and also a publication that takes place in Miami during the time that Art Basel would happen. He said, but I want you not to do anything that's comfortable. I don't want you to do a painting. I want you to do something that you've never done before. And I said, well, never done a book, and I'm really interested and I'm really concerned about COVID. So I'm going to do the book about COVID, and I'm going to use the format, of course, of Ed Ruscha and his 26 gasoline stations. So here is, I enlisted the aid of my husband. I said, you're my collaborator. And we plotted out the funeral homes all around Miami-Dade County, from Homestead to Aventura. This one is from Homestead. And it is, if you look, it was raining every day that we tried to do this, but it was like going on a vacation. We were stuck at home, but here we could travel around all parts of Dade County that we'd never seen before And it was a kind of a sad vacation, but it was a vacation. So here it was a rainy, gray day. It just stopped raining for a minute so I could take this picture. If you look, there's the sky, there's the earth, and then there's underground where they're digging, and it says cuidado, caution, cuidado. If you look closely, the N on the Branham sign is backwards. So I never photograph, but in this case, I had my iPhone and photographed with the iPhone. And really, it was a learning experience because it made me really focus in and see everything that was happening in that window of the camera. It was a very good exercise. Here we have a funeral home on Bird Road in Miami. Wonderful sky, and the funeral home looks like it's floating on a sea of asphalt. Another funeral home in Opa-locka in an industrial area. And here we have the juxtaposition of the hearse and the painting on the asphalt. And the final funeral home picture is this, 2 sevens for 770, 2 columns, 2 lamp posts, and 2 graces. And then this is the final page in the book. We have documented the visits to 26 funeral homes around Miami-Dade County, Florida, with a nod to Ed Ruscha's 26 gasoline stations. We acknowledge with reverence those who were among us that have passed away from COVID-19. My thanks to my husband, Harold, and to Frank Casal, who really helped us put this book together. And then if you look at the bottom, it says November 2nd, which is the Day of the Dead. And here are the cases on November 2nd. Now I'm going back to this slide, which you saw from the cornered, but I always loved drawing, but never had my own vocabulary. And as I'm looking at these chords and the placement and the shadows, it started to dawn on me that this could be my vocabulary for drawing. And again, this piece was influential in my return to drawing. To plot these placement of these balls on the cord, I had to send where they were going to be in diagrams to the engineers and fabricators. So I didn't send them on Arch's watercolor paper, but I did send graphs. And I realized in plotting these balls and where they should be placed, and I did it with a bingo tumbler, I realized that 2 of these would never match, or not in a long time. And if I had 2 sets of Arch's watercolor papers, they would never end up matching. And so I did about 30 of these. But the framework that I used to plot them, and these and this was called random numbers to be repeated until 2 sets match. But it led me, or gave me, the courage to start drawing. So here's some of the first drawings. This one where I'm taking the structure, leaving the diagram behind and playing with the structure again. And then this piece, it goes back to the chords. When chords cross, they make that little ping, and then I'm arranging them in different forms. Although it's a 2-dimensional plane, I'm thinking of it in this 3-dimensional space of rhythms and repetitions and all those kinds of things. Here I have a drawing which is structure within structure within structure. Here I was given a space under the bridge, and I knew in the first room I wanted to do a cord installation, but then I knew it would be too much to do another cord installation in the middle room. So I thought about it and looked at the space and came up with, if you see to the far left, the black, whatever shape you want to call that is, in the back, broken rectangle, I guess. There's a space in between, behind it. You can see it better here. So I repeated that shape, and then I decided to do the same thing across at the other side of the room. And so they're talking to each other. So I'm using the whole space basically by extending it across the room. There was also outside of under the bridge, if you've been there, there's a red door, and decided I would take that red door and paint the same image inside. So here we have this red rectangle that is the same size exactly as the door next to the archway there. And I had a kind of an awakening because it was a big thing for me to figure out, like in the cord pieces, exactly where I should place them. And I realized that I could also do the same thing with the rectangle and with painting on a flat surface. So here I am really thinking about painting. In 2016, I was asked to do an installation at Meeting House Gallery, downtown Miami. I thought I was going to do a cord installation, but they didn't want too many holes in the wall. And so I thought, I'm going to paint. So I painted the beams on the top of the ceiling in the other room. And then I kind of played with these black and white stripes in this room. And I got to where you see that pink arch, and I'm thinking red, blue, black, white, yellow, the Malevich, the Mondrian, the Bauhaus, the de Still colors. And I'm saying, why am I thinking in this masculine architectural way? What's the matter with pink? What's the matter with doing things like a woman might paint her living room? And so I said, aha. And that gave me the freedom to use whatever color and go wild with color. Here is another arch that I painted pink. And now I'm going to show you 2020, which is a show that I did this year at Emerson Dorsch Gallery. 2020 was for the year and also for how we see, how our vision can be deceptive. And the other thing I want to tell you before I show this 2-minute video is that the paintings grew. I felt like the larger the painting, the more we felt like one would feel like they were in an installation. They're very colorful. I'm free to use color thanks to Meeting House Gallery. And the paintings are 8 foot by 8 foot and 8 foot by 16 feet. There's also powder-coated aluminum sculptures that are 8 feet long and 4 feet high and 2 feet wide that seem to appear like they're coming out of the installations. So I'm dealing with geometry, color, ways of seeing the geometric forms pop in and out into space, and enjoy. Now I'm going to show you another very like 60-second or less video. People ask me how I make my work. I lay out tables on a wooden boards, 8-foot by 4 feet boards on my tables and paint flat. So here I either store them flat or store them in sonotubes. And here is unrolling one of the paintings for the show. Look fast. That's it. All right, back to this 2020 show. I had made maquettes again for the show, figured out many different options, but had finished all the large pieces and still had time. So I decided to make some smaller work for back to 45 by 45 again. And what I like to do is push the work a little bit further. And so I decided with this panel on the right, this Arches paper on the right, I would create 4 panels and use the same form. So to push it a little bit more. And I like that idea of taking my work and see what else I can do with it, see how I can push it along, and to take advantage of accidents. So here's another one that was in that show in the back room in the office where I am now. And the panels that you see were really 2 different installations installed in different ways. So I don't feel that things have to be stagnant, but we can change and the work can also change. Here is an installation, well, a permanent installation for art in public places at Caribbean Village. It's called Welcome to the Village. And I drew from the architecture of the space and also the name Caribbean Village, which suggests color and rhythm and movement. And I looked above at the architecture and noticed the horizontal lines on the building, the cleavage between the building, the windows, and the shapes around the windows to come up with this installation. There were 4 columns. We see 3 here, but the columns, 2 were in front, 2 were a little bit recessed. And on each column, I played with different features, which then reflected back into the tile work in front of it. Also, I had 3 sections, the cleavage in the middle there, and then the other 2 sections played off the rhythms and repetitions, and the horizontal lines pulled the pieces together. The final works I'm going to show you are from this year. They've survived 2 hurricanes so far outside of the Bass Museum. When the Bass closed because of COVID, Miami Beach and the Bass decided they would have a group of works called Art Outdoors. And I was invited to do 32 banners that were around this Collins Avenue Park. So here we have the iconic, I'm not sure I pronounce his name right, Ugo Rondinone. You can correct me when it's over. But anyway, I wanted to play against this piece that was so important to the Bass. And I looked at it and I noticed it's this massive structure, but it's affected by gravity. And I said, aha, I'm free of gravity. Finally, I'm painting and I can leave gravity behind. So here's my little floating version of this humongous structure. Also, this is a banner in front of the Miami City Ballet. Here is another piece, and I'm just going to go into the methods for making this. It's 48 long by 24 wide. And to make this, I didn't have much time, and so I took from drawings that I had just completed, which is this one. And then I went to a 12 by 6 gridded paper and drew what I wanted to on that paper, which was run through a scanner. And then the CYMK colors were added to that. I had help from Frank Casal who also helped me with the funeral home book. He's a great help. And so that's the process. Here is another one, a banner, and I want to talk about chance again and how lucky accidents. This is the painting it came from. But when I put this painting through a copier, the copier was running dry of ink. And so I had these streaks and I had colors that were much different from the painting I was doing. And I looked and I said, boy, that's an improvement. Let's use that. And so this is the scanned image that I then put the CYMK colors in. And finally, the final image is this one, the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, Karen, that was so wonderful.
Thank you.
Beginning to end. I'm struck by Sandra Schulman at the very beginning, the quote that I took from her about you at play and how much fun you have at play. And I think you must have used the word play so many times over and over again. And you ended with being free of gravity, and what a wonderful way to end. Thank you so much. This has been a total pleasure. And speaking as the person who organizes these, I'm looking over at the participant list, and we had a lot of people here tonight. And it underscores for me the freedom that I'm feeling in having these art salons virtually, because people can join us from wherever they are, anywhere. So we're not sitting in a room together, but hug everybody. The other thing that I wanted to do tonight, just very briefly, is to thank a few of the people that have worked with me to help make these virtual art salons a reality. One is to thank Ezra Hubbard, who's with us tonight, who, to my astonishment, gave me a donation that allowed us to have art salons for free, and allowed the Armory to keep working with me. And that goes to my next thank you, which is to Naomi Wallen at the Armory and Tom Pearson, the director, and the board, because they have worked with me for the past almost 9 years and have made the art salons possible, have made the exhibitions, the Artists of Art Salons exhibitions possible. And part of the donation money in the past has always gone to them for their work in this, and that was able to continue. And I wanted to thank my husband, Jerry Kornbluth, because he's the audio-visual person and the graphic person and the web designer, and it's wonderful having a techie in the house. And it takes a village. It really, really does. And it takes a village to make an art salon, and that's all of the people who join together. I hope that you'll come again next month and whenever you can. So with that, I think it's time to say good night. One other thing that I wanted to say is that Jerry is recording every art salon. For people who haven't been here before, all of the art salons are recorded. He's a recording engineer first and foremost, and he's been doing this for 6 or 7 years now. They're all archived on my website, and if you've got a free afternoon or a free evening, you can dip in and pick one of your choosing and be back to art salon anytime you'd like to be. So with that, thank you all for being here. Hope to see you again real soon, and good night.